On an isolated farm in rural Oklahoma, there lived an old rancher named Harlan. He had no family. He only had his cattle, over 200 head, that he raised with his own hands for decades. One morning, he woke up and found them all dead, foaming at the mouth, poisoned. The police came, looked around, said there was no evidence, but Harlan knew who did it. 4 men from the neighboring town. And he decided the law wasn't going to solve this. He would, one by one. Harlan Cooper was 73 years old and woke up every day at 5 in the morning, always, since he was 18. First the coffee, black, no sugar, then his boots. After that, the worn hat that had been his father's, and finally, he'd go out to check the cattle. That October morning started like every other. Grey sky, cold air, the smell of wet earth promising rain. But when he reached the first pen, he knew something was wrong. Too much silence. The cattle always made noise, lowing, hoofbeats, the constant sound of 200 head, moving, eating, living. Now there was nothing, just silence. Harlan walked faster. His heart started pounding in his chest. He reached the pen and stopped dead. Cows. Dozens of cows, all on the ground, still, eyes open with white foam at their mouths. No! He ran to the second pen. Same thing, all dead. Third pen, fourth, fifth, 200 head of cattle, 30 years of work, everything he had in this world. Dead. Harlan fell to his knees in the mud. He didn't cry, didn't scream. Just stayed there staring at the devastation like it was a nightmare he'd wake up from. But he didn't wake up. He called the sheriff at 6:30 in the morning. He arrived at 9. Sheriff Dalton was a man in his late 40s with a beer gut and an unfriendly face. He climbed out of the patrol car chewing gum. Jesus, Harlan, this is bad. Bad! This is everything I have, Dalton, everything. The sheriff walked among the corpses, crouched down, smelled the foam. Poison, definitely poison. I know it's poison. Question is who? Dalton stood up, spit out his gum. You got enemies? Harlan thought about the Calhoun brothers. Wade, Roy, Jesse, and Caleb. 4 pieces of shit who'd been trying to buy his land for years, first with offers, then with threats. The last time they came was 2 weeks ago. Wade had told him, "This land's gonna be ours, old man. Easy way or hard way." Harlan had aimed his shotgun at them until they got in their trucks and left. "The Calhouns," Harlan said. "The Calhoun brothers." Dalton frowned. "They're businessmen, Harlan, not cattle poisoners." "Businessmen, my ass. They're land thieves, and they want my ranch." "You got proof?" "The dead cattle are proof. That's evidence of poisoning, not evidence of who did it." Dalton sighed. "Look, I'll go talk to them, but without concrete proof, I can't do anything." "Then get proof." "Doesn't work that way." "Then how does it work? I just sit here and watch myself lose everything?" Dalton took off his hat, scratched his head. "I'm sorry, Harlan. I really am. I'll do what I can. I promise." He left, leaving an empty promise and dust in the air. Harlan spent the rest of the day burying cows. He dug holes with the old backhoe that barely worked, pushed the bodies in, covered them with dirt. By the time he finished, it was 9 at night. His hands were destroyed, his back broken, his soul empty. He went into the house, didn't turn on the lights, sat in the living room chair with a bottle of whiskey he hadn't opened in years, took a long pull. It burned. The phone rang. "Hello? Harlan Cooper." The voice was Wade Calhoun's. Harlan would recognize it anywhere. "Heard you had a little problem with your cattle." "It was you. Don't know what you're talking about." "It was you, you son of a bitch." Wade laughed. An ugly laugh, full of satisfaction. "You know what, old man? I'm tired of playing games. I'm going to make you one last offer, $50,000 for the land. Take it or leave it. Go to hell. The land's worth $300,000, but you don't have cattle anymore. You got nothing to pay your debts with. In 3 months, the bank takes the ranch anyway." Wade paused. "At least this way you get something." I'm not selling you shit. Then you're going to end up with nothing. And when you're living under a bridge, remember you had a chance. Wade, what? I'm going to kill you. Silence on the other end. Then another laugh, more nervous this time. Sure, old man, you and what army? The call cut off. Harlan sat in the darkness. Phone in one hand, bottle in the other. He thought about his wife, Helen, dead 15 years from cancer. He thought about his son, David, dead 20 years in Iraq. And now this, the last thing he had left. He stood up, went to the basement, opened the metal cabinet that had been locked for years. Inside was his army rifle, an M1 Garand from World War II. Still worked, still had ammunition. He took it out, cleaned it, loaded it. He wasn't calling the police again. He wasn't waiting for justice. Justice in this country was dead, just like his cattle. But he was still alive. And as long as he was alive, he was going to do what had to be done. One by one, the 4 Calhoun brothers were going to pay. The next morning, Harlan didn't check the cattle. There was no cattle to check. He sat on his porch with coffee and watched the sun come up over the empty corrals. At 9 o'clock, Sheriff Dalton's patrol car pulled up. The sheriff got out slowly. He looked tired. Talk to the Calhouns. And? They said they don't know nothing about your cattle. Said they were in Tulsa all week on business. Got receipts, got witnesses. They're lying. Maybe, but I can't prove it. Dalton leaned against the porch railing. Look, Harlan, between you and me, I think they did it too, but my hands are tied. Without evidence, without witnesses, there's nothing I can do. So that's it? That's it, I'm sorry. Dalton left. Harlan sat there for another hour. Then he went inside, got his rifle, got in his old Ford pickup, drove into town. Wade Calhoun owned a car dealership on Main Street. Big lot, shiny cars, an office with his name on the window in gold letters. Harlan parked across the street and waited. Wade came out at noon, wearing an expensive suit, talking on his phone, laughing about something. He got into a black Mercedes, drove off. Harlan followed. Wade didn't go home. He went to Murphy's Bar on the edge of town, the kind of place where men went to drink away their problems. Harlan waited in the parking lot. 3 hours later, Wade came out, drunk, stumbling, got in his Mercedes and drove away, weaving across the yellow line. Harlan followed at a distance. Wade turned onto Route 9, heading east toward his ranch outside town. The road was empty, nothing but fields and darkness. Harlan sped up, pulled alongside the Mercedes. Wade looked over, confused. Then Harlan swerved. Metal screamed. The Mercedes spun off the road, crashed through a fence, flipped twice and landed upside down in a ditch. Harlan stopped, got out, walked to the wreck. Wade was hanging upside down from his seatbelt, blood running down his face, eyes unfocused. Harlan, what the hell? Harlan crouched down, looked him in the eyes. You killed my cattle. We didn't. You killed everything I had, and you laughed about it. Please, I need a hospital. You should have thought about that before you poisoned 200 head of cattle. It was Roy's idea. He said you'd just sell after. There it was. The confession. Harlan stood up, walked back to his truck. Wait, you can't leave me here. Sure I can. I'll die. Maybe someone finds you first. Harlan opened his truck door. Or maybe you don't. Either way, that's one. One? One what? You got 3 brothers. I figure this is fair. 1 life for 200. He drove away. Wade's screams faded behind him. The next morning they found Wade Calhoun dead in his wrecked Mercedes. Sheriff Dalton ruled it a drunk driving accident. At the funeral, Roy, Jesse, and Caleb stood by the casket, their faces hard, their eyes scanning the small crowd. Harlan was there, in the back, wearing his Sunday suit. When Roy saw him, his jaw clenched. After the service, Roy walked over. You did this. Your brother was drunk, ran off the road. The sheriff said so himself. Bullshit. You killed him. Prove it. Roy stepped closer. His breath smelled like whiskey and rage. You just signed your own death warrant, old man, you know that? Maybe, but Wade's still dead. And you're next. You threatening me? Nope. Just stating facts. You, Jesse, and Caleb, 3 left. I got plenty of time. Roy's fist came fast, caught Harlan on the jaw, knocked him back against a headstone. The sheriff appeared out of nowhere. That's enough, Roy. Get out of here before I arrest you. Roy pointed at Harlan. This isn't over. I know, Harlan said, wiping blood from his lip. It's just getting started. That night, Harlan sat on his porch again. His jaw hurt, his ribs hurt, everything hurt. But Wade Calhoun was dead, and Harlan was still alive, 3 more to go. He cleaned his rifle, loaded it, set it beside his chair. Somewhere out there, Roy, Jesse, and Caleb were planning something, coming for him. Let them come. He'd be ready. The old rancher from Oklahoma wasn't scared anymore. He had nothing left to lose. And that made him the most dangerous man in the county. Roy Calhoun didn't wait long. 2 nights after Wade's funeral, Harlan heard the trucks coming. 3 of them, headlights off, moving slow down the dirt road toward his house. Harlan was already awake. He'd been expecting this. He grabbed his rifle and slipped out the back door, moved through the darkness toward the barn. The trucks stopped 50 yards from the house. Doors opened. Men got out, 6 of them. Roy, Jesse, Caleb, and 3 others Harlan didn't recognize. Hired guns, probably. They spread out, surrounding the house. Roy raised his hand, pointed at the front door. 2 men kicked it in, rushed inside with flashlights and guns. Harlan watched from the barn loft. 30 seconds later, the men came back out. He's not here, Roy cursed, loud enough for Harlan to hear across the yard. Check the barn, check everywhere, find that old bastard. They started walking toward the barn. Harlan aimed his rifle, waited until they were 20 feet away. Then he fired. The shot echoed across the prairie. One of the hired guns dropped. The others scattered, diving behind trucks and fence posts. He's in the barn, someone yelled. Bullets tore through the barn walls. Wood splintered. Hay exploded. Harlan stayed low, moving to a different position. He fired again. Another man went down. Roy was screaming orders. Circle around! Get behind him! But Harlan wasn't waiting. He climbed down the back ladder and ran into the night. Into the fields he'd worked for 30 years, fields he knew better than his own face. They chased him, flashlights cutting through the darkness like knives. But he was faster, quieter. He'd hunted these fields since he was a boy. He led them east, toward the old creek bed, toward the place where the ground got soft and dangerous. Behind him he heard cursing, splashing. Someone fell. Goddamn mud! Harlan kept moving, crossed the creek where he knew the rocks were solid, climbed the far bank, turned around, aimed. Jesse Calhoun was struggling through the water, stuck in mud up to his knees. Harlan fired. Jesse went down face first into the creek. Didn't move. More shots came his way. Harlan disappeared into the tree line. Roy's voice echoed through the night. Jesse! Jesse! No answer. The shooting stopped. Harlan heard trucks starting up, leaving fast. He waited 30 minutes, then walked back to the creek. Jesse was dead, face down in 6 inches of water. That's 2, Harlan thought. He dragged the body up onto the bank, left it there for someone to find. Walked home as the sun came up. His house was destroyed. Windows shot out. Furniture torn apart. They'd trashed everything looking for him. Harlan stood in what used to be his living room, looked at the photograph of Helen and David lying on the floor, glass broken, frame cracked. He picked it up, brushed off the glass. This had been his home for 40 years. Now it was just another thing they'd taken from him. He heard a car coming, reached for his rifle, but it was Sheriff Dalton, alone. The sheriff got out, looked at the house, looked at Harlan. Found Jesse Calhoun in your creek this morning. That right? Shot in the chest. You know anything about that? Nope. Dalton sighed, took off his hat. Harlan, I know what's happening here, and part of me don't blame you, but this has to stop. Tell that to Roy and Caleb. I'm telling you because you're the one I can actually arrest. Dalton put his hat back on. Next body I find, I'm taking you in. You hear me? I hear you. I mean it. I said I hear you. Dalton left. Harlan sat on his porch, the same porch where he'd sat every morning for decades. 2 down, 2 to go. But Roy and Caleb weren't stupid. They'd be more careful now, more dangerous. That was fine. So would he. He loaded his rifle, checked his ammunition, made a list in his head of all the places the Calhoun brothers might be. The sun climbed higher. Another day in Oklahoma. Another day closer to the end. One way or another, this was going to finish soon. And Harlan Cooper was going to make sure he finished it. Roy Calhoun disappeared for a week. No one saw him. His dealership stayed closed. His house was dark. But Harlan knew he hadn't left town. Men like Roy didn't run. They regrouped. Caleb was different. He stayed visible. Went to work every day at the feed store he owned. Acted like nothing had happened. Like his 2 brothers weren't dead. But Harlan saw the fear in his eyes. On the 8th day, Harlan got a phone call. "Let's end this." It was Roy. His voice was cold, flat. "Tonight, 9 o'clock, the old grain elevator on Route 33. Just you and me." "Why would I do that?" "Because if you don't, I burn down every farm between here and Tulsa until someone gives you up. I'll kill everyone you've ever talked to, every neighbor, every friend." "I don't have friends anymore." "Then I'll just start killing random people. Your choice, old man. You and me tonight or innocent blood on your hands." The line went dead. Harlan sat there holding the phone. It was a trap. Obviously, Roy wouldn't face him alone, but he'd go anyway, because Roy was right about one thing. Harlan couldn't let innocent people die for his war. At 8:30, he loaded his rifle, put extra ammunition in his pockets, wrote a short letter and left it on the kitchen table. Then he drove to the grain elevator. The old building rose up against the night sky like a tombstone. Abandoned for 20 years, windows broken, walls covered in rust and graffiti. Harlan parked 100 yards away, walked the rest. The front door was open. He went inside. The interior was dark, empty. Moonlight came through holes in the roof. "I'm here," Harlan called out. Footsteps echoed above him. 2nd floor. He climbed the metal stairs, each step creaking under his weight. Roy was waiting in the main room, standing in a shaft of moonlight, gun in his hand. But he wasn't alone. Caleb stood behind him, and 4 other men, all armed. "You didn't really think I'd fight fair, did you?" Roy smiled. "Never crossed my mind." "Good, then you won't be disappointed." Roy raised his gun. "Any last words?" "Yeah." "Duck." Roy frowned. "What?" The explosion came from outside, massive. The whole building shook. Harlan had spent the afternoon planting dynamite around the grain elevator's support beams, old mining explosives he'd kept in his barn for 40 years. The floor tilted, men screamed, guns fired wild. Harlan dove behind an old conveyor belt as the building started to collapse. Metal shrieked. Concrete crumbled. The 2nd floor gave way and everyone fell into the darkness below. Harlan landed hard. Something cracked in his ribs. Pain shot through his chest. But he was alive. Around him, men moaned in the rubble. Dust filled the air. A fire started somewhere in the wreckage. Harlan found his rifle, stood up. Every movement hurt. He saw Caleb 20 feet away, pinned under a beam, crying. "Please, help me." Harlan walked past him, found Roy buried up to his waist in debris, blood on his face. Gun gone. Their eyes met. "You crazy son of a bitch," Roy said. "You blew up the whole building." Seemed appropriate. "You'll die too. Look at this place. You'll never get out." "Maybe, but you definitely won't." Roy tried to move. Couldn't. The debris had him trapped. "Wait. We can make a deal. Money. I got money. Lots of it." "I don't want your money." "Then what do you want?" "My cattle back. My life back." Harlan's voice was quiet. "But I can't have those, so I'll settle for justice." He turned and walked toward the hole in the wall where the explosion had blown out the side of the building. "Harlan, don't leave me here! Harlan!" The fire was spreading fast. Smoke filled the air. Harlan climbed through the rubble, made it outside, collapsed on the ground 50 yards away. Behind him, the grain elevator burned. Roy and Caleb's screams faded as the fire consumed everything. Harlan lay there, watching it burn. 4 brothers, all dead. Justice for 200 cattle. Sheriff Dalton found him an hour later, unconscious, barely breathing. They took him to the hospital. When he woke up 3 days later, the sheriff was sitting beside his bed. "The Calhouns are dead, all of them." "I know. Should I arrest you?" Harlan looked at him. "Can you prove I did anything?" Dalton was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up. "Get well, Harlan, and stay out of trouble." He left. Harlan closed his eyes. It was over. Finally over. Harlan spent 2 weeks in the hospital. Broken ribs, collapsed lung, burns on his arms and legs. The doctor said he was lucky to be alive. Harlan didn't feel lucky. When they released him, he had nowhere to go. His house was condemned. Too much damage from the shootout. The bank had started foreclosure on the land. Everything was gone. He stayed in a motel on the edge of town, room 12. $15 a night, paid weekly. One morning there was a knock on his door. He opened it. A woman stood there, maybe 40 years old, blonde hair, nervous eyes. "Mr. Cooper?" "Yeah." "I'm Sarah Jennings. I wanted to thank you." "Don't know you." "No, but you saved my daughter." She wiped her eyes. "The Calhouns were pressuring my husband to sell our farm. When he refused, they threatened our little girl, said they'd take her. We were so scared we almost left Oklahoma." Harlan said nothing. "Then they died, and we were safe again." She held out an envelope. "This is from 12 families. Families the Calhouns hurt. We took up a collection. I don't want money. It's $30,000. It's not much, but maybe it helps you start over." She put the envelope in his hand and left before he could refuse. Harlan stood there holding $30,000. Blood money. That's what it was. But it was also a future. He used it to buy a small piece of land, 20 acres outside of town, no house, just land and an old trailer. He didn't buy cattle, couldn't afford them anyway. Instead, he planted corn, wheat, vegetables, worked the land with his hands like his father had taught him. People from town started coming by, asking questions, wanting to hear the story. Harlan never told it, but they came anyway. And some of them stayed to help. Old farmers who'd lost their land to men like the Calhouns, young families who wanted to learn, people who'd been afraid for so long they'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up. Within 6 months, Harlan's 20 acres had become something more, a community, small, quiet, but real. They called it Cooper's Farm. Harlan tried to stop them, said it was everyone's farm, not just his. They didn't listen. One evening, he was sitting on the porch of his trailer when Sheriff Dalton drove up. "Got something for you?" He handed Harlan a folder. Inside were property deeds for the Calhoun dealership, the feed store, the land they'd owned. "What's this?" The Calhouns died without wills. No family to inherit. State auctioned everything. Dalton smiled. "Someone bought it all anonymously, then transferred ownership to a trust for cooperative farming." "Who?" "Can't say. Anonymous means anonymous." Dalton tipped his hat. "But whoever it was wanted you to manage it, help families who need land, people who got pushed out by men like the Calhouns." Harlan looked at the deeds. Hundreds of acres, buildings, resources. "Why me?" "Maybe because you're the only man who fought back and won." Dalton left. Harlan sat there as the sun went down, holding the future in his hands. His cattle were gone, his old life was gone, Helen and David were gone, but something new was growing, something that mattered. That night he walked the fields, his fields, everyone's fields. He thought about Wade, Jesse, Roy, Caleb. 4 men who'd thought power came from fear. They'd been wrong. Power came from community, from people standing together, from refusing to be broken. Harlan Cooper was 73 years old. He'd lost everything, and somehow he'd gained more. Not revenge. That was empty. Purpose. That was real. He looked up at the Oklahoma sky, full of stars, full of possibility. Tomorrow he'd wake at 5, have his coffee, put on his boots, and he'd work the land again. Not alone this time. Never alone again. What would you do if someone took everything from you? Would you fight back or walk away? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story moved you, share it. Because sometimes the smallest act of courage can change everything.